My story involves myself and three of my really good friends throughout my whole childhood. I'll have them go by Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy. I am still good friends with them to this day. I could not write this story to you without their help, consent, and experiences as well. The story you are about to read is true and not made up in any way. Regardless of whether we had been seeing things or not, the reality is we experienced something very horrifying one night at my friend Kevin's cabin. We thought long and hard about actually sharing it or not, afraid of being ridiculed, but we are ready to share with the community. Again, you had to be there to experience it. One of my friends actually suffered a nervous breakdown after the incident and needed counseling. Regardless, I want you to know that I have always been a skeptic about the paranormal and find it very hard to believe in many aspects. But I love to watch, listen, and read about it simply because I always like to have an open mind in life. An open mind, in my opinion, is a growing one. Whether it was paranormal or not, someone was clearly there that night. Now, finally on with the story. During midsummer, usually around the middle of July, my good friends and I always made time to go up to Kevin's family cabin way up north in the forests of Minnesota. The cabin is located on Vermilion Lake. Throughout all our young years, we would always go, accompanied by Kevin's dad who owned the cabin, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, we felt mature and old enough to go to the cabin on our own without Kevin's dad or any other adult supervision that might have accompanied us. I want to mention a little information about Kevin's cabin to help you picture the scenario. Kevin's cabin is very remote and located on a very large island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one closest to us was at least a solid quarter or half a mile away, which is my best guess. You could get to it by taking a man-made path around the island. To get to Kevin's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island and take his boat across the lake about half a mile to reach the cabin. This lake is huge. My mind always tended to run wild when sleeping there at night throughout all my years. The cabin was all one level with only 2 bedrooms next to one another, a kitchen and living room connected, and a bathroom in the back. Where you slept, there was always at least one window in each room with no curtains at all, so it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake. This is where my mind would run, as I always thought someone was peering in. Of course, nobody ever was. I had been to this cabin a dozen times throughout my life and nothing had ever happened. The older I got, the easier it was to sleep there. Now for the event. We usually stayed for about a week or 4 to 5 nights. On the 3rd night of the trip, when we were finally there on our own, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking beer all night. I do not condone underage drinking, by the way. We just happened to sneak some, being the rebels we are. We went out to the dock to gaze up at the magnificent stars and enjoy our buzz, when all of a sudden we heard something out on the water that sounded like a fish jumping to catch a bug. We quickly looked out at the lake with curiosity, wondering where the splash had come from. We had our fishing poles ready, just in case. Thankfully, the moon was out that night, which helped light up the lake. Otherwise, it would have been pitch black with no city lights for miles and miles, and we would not have been able to see anything on the lake. My friend Ryan began to point and say, what the hell is that? After looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at, all I can describe is that it simply looked like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring at us directly. It was about 75 yards or so out in the lake from the dock. There is no question that I could see its features. It had long black hair and very pale skin like a face, but I could not make out the eyes, mouth, nose, or chin, as if it was just a blob of pale skin with long black hair over it. I will never forget the feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs, neck, and arms all stood up, and I was paralyzed inside, ready to leave at that moment. But we told ourselves it was just a loon. These birds are very popular night drifters on the lake and hunt late. They have black and white colors on their coats and hunt by diving deep into the water, holding their breath for up to minutes sometimes. So it was possible that a loon suddenly popped up in the water after hunting, or at least we tried to convince ourselves of that. All of us were creeped out and noticed it was not moving one bit, just treading water in the same place. We went back to our campfire, lit it even brighter, and headed inside to drink more. I would like to mention that there was a staircase outside Kevin's cabin, about 8 stairs in length, down to the bottom where the fire pit and dock were. We soon forgot about the head with the help of the beer, until I had to use the bathroom really badly, and the one inside was occupied. I just went outside to do my business since we were in the great outdoors. When I was taking a pee and glancing out at the beautiful moonlit lake, I noticed that the black circular object was still there, but about 30 yards closer now. It still looked as if it was staring right at me. I could easily see the nose on this thing's face. Again, it was very pale, like it had not seen the sun for years. A very, very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside and told my other friends to come look quick, keeping my eyes glued to it at the cabin door. We came outside to see it still there looking at us, as if this head was cocked up at us with its chin in the air. Nobody dared go down to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, ruling out that it was probably not a loon because a loon would not have treaded the water in the same spot. Eventually, the current would have drifted it somewhere else in a rocking manner. For a loon to stay in the same spot for almost an hour or two made no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a board and not moving a single muscle, just staring up at us from the deck instead. There was no ripple effect at all in the lake from the object. We said it was just a log and went back in. I could tell everyone else felt uneasy too. A few hours passed. It was super late into the night at this point, and we knew we needed sleep. Being my curious self, I looked back outside once more, and the black object had completely vanished. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, thinking the log must have floated off or just hit shore somewhere. As we slept with the windows open that night, there was no air conditioning in this cabin, and we had to open them or we would fry in the middle of summer. Tommy and I slept in the living room while my 2 other friends slept in the 2 separate bedrooms with their doors open. Not being able to sleep but keeping my eyes closed, I began to hear someone walking around at the bottom of the stairs to the cabin, around the campfire and at the bottom of the stairs. I thought I was about to soil myself. No question, whatever or whoever I heard down there was off the dock now, pacing back and forth as it made the sound of a boot clicking on the wood. It was as if they were not sure what to do with themselves. It lasted for about 3 minutes. Wanting to whisper to my buddy, but frozen in fear, I just kept my eyes shut and ears on full alert. The footsteps sounded like they took 2 steps up the deck stairs all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they were sprinting down the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone and a couple of minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy asking if he heard the steps. Both of us sat up. I was startled when my friend Ryan walked out of his room and said, "We need to leave," a minute after these steps vanished. He must have heard us talking, so he felt he could come out as well. But either way, he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked him, why? He woke up my other friend Kevin in the other room and said, "Let's go, get to the boat, it's time to go." I asked him, "What?" "Ryan, what the hell is wrong with you?" He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff, and I will never forget what he said. nor will my other friends. He said when he was turning sides on his bed to get more comfortable, he saw someone peeking in at the top right corner of his window. It quickly shifted out of his view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin and long black hair down the window. Again, another thing I want to add. When we look back at what he experienced, it chills us to the bone realizing that since this face was in the top right corner of the window in my friend's room where he was sleeping, this thing either was damn near 8 feet tall, standing on something like bricks trying to peek in, or was floating. Ryan then continued to say, "Let's effing go very seriously." It absolutely disturbed the hell out of my mind, and feeling like I was going to be sick, I told them what my friend and I heard in the living room. We all agreed and packed our stuff and booked it without cleaning the cabin or anything. We always had to clean the cabin before leaving. We locked up, and as we headed down the stairs, we saw barefoot prints in the dirt heading off into the path and all around the cabin. We picked up our steps, getting to the boat, not knowing what was watching us or around us, threw our stuff on the boat, untied it, and sped off. I did not even think about the head in the water anymore or to look in the water. Thank God. My eyes were just glued to the island trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we had finally gotten our stuff packed in the car and the boat tied up, we hopped in the car and took off. We had been driving about 10 miles when, out of the blue, Ryan, who said he saw the person outside his window, all of a sudden broke down in the car sobbing, saying, "What was it, guys?" We called our parents on the way back to tell them what had happened and that Ryan was freaking out. They told us to just get home safely and quickly. It was late, about 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept and it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up there the following weekend and said he experienced nothing while there but did mention barefoot footprints were still lingering about, which he thought odd because someone was walking around his property, and it bugged him badly. Whatever my one friend saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights and ended up having to seek some help for a couple of weeks and take some sleeping medicine. As time went on, he ended up being fine but is not comfortable sleeping next to a window without a curtain. I to this day cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us, nor can I explain what I saw in the lake or what Ryan specifically saw. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night, according to my friend's dad who owns it, which I believe him. Personally, I have never decided to go back to the cabin, which really makes me sad because I had great childhood memories there. Tommy and Kevin have both gone back and been fine, but Ryan refuses to go back and I am with him. A lot of people have cabins on this island, so it could have been a prank in the making that got busted when Ryan saw the person at the window, or the person possibly wanting to do something worse. I will never be able to explain what was floating in the lake, but the fact that this incident, along with barefoot prints and someone looking in at Ryan at night, all happened in the same night, seems like more than a coincidence. It was around 2015, and I was living in Seattle. I worked in an office that allowed me to bring my dog to work, a 100-pound German Shepherd. He's a big sweetheart but looks pretty scary to strangers. After work one day, I got on the bus home, which was about a 45-minute ride. I noticed someone staring at me but didn't think much of it. While it's unsettling to be watched, I've had my fair share of odd conversations on the bus, so it wasn't unusual to encounter weird behavior. I honestly don't remember much about his appearance, but I do remember thinking he looked fairly normal and didn't seem high or drunk. My bus stop was on a busy street in a somewhat sketchier part of town, but it wasn't frequently trafficked. When we reached the stop, my dog and I set off on the short walk home, just a few blocks away. As I got off the bus, I noticed the man who'd been watching me got off too. Something was off about this guy. He seemed intent on keeping pace with me, trailing closely behind. I'd heard advice before that you shouldn't go straight home if you're being followed. I'm sure that's situation specific, and sometimes it's safer to be in your home, but nothing had happened besides having my personal space invaded, and I didn't feel immediately unsafe, so I chose not to lead this stranger straight to my door. I knew my partner at the time wasn't home, so I decided the best plan was to weave through my neighborhood for several blocks to try to lose him. I think part of me also wanted to be sure I was actually being followed, or if this person just happened to be walking the same way. After several blocks, it became clear he was following me. I was weaving around erratically and he was walking the same path. Neither of us spoke, and I was getting more and more frustrated that anyone would follow a woman home. The streets were quiet and I couldn't see anyone around I could signal for help. I don't think I'd be so surprised if I was alone and without my dog. I can't imagine anyone in their right mind following someone with a large German Shepherd. I started walking faster when I rounded a corner and quickly ducked into a walkway beside a duplex a block from my house. I hoped the pathway would wrap around the house completely so I could get out of this person's line of sight, but I was met with a fence right in front of me and didn't have time to backtrack. I was cornered in a small nook between a house, a fence, and a hedge. I crouched down with my dog and waited for the guy to pass us. I watched as the man strolled by, seemingly not noticing us at all. He didn't turn his head or even glance our way. I decided we'd stay there a few minutes to make sure he was gone. Of course, my dog was as calm as ever, just lying on his side taking a nap. Super helpful. About 3 minutes went by. Just as I was thinking it was safe to head home, the man stepped into my line of sight. He didn't make eye contact with me. Just like the first time he walked by, he was moving calmly and deliberately and slowly stopped right in front of me just off the curb. He was about 2 yards away, facing me but not directly looking, with only a sidewalk and a grassy strip between us. I watched him start to unload his pockets. He had a number of metal objects that he took out and placed in a line. To this day, I'm not sure what they were, but I'm glad I never found out. At that point, I called 911 and told them what was happening, that someone was following me and acting erratically. The police arrived quickly, and as soon as they pulled up, the dispatcher told me to get out of there. I hurried out of my hiding spot and took a non-direct path home since my house was technically in line of sight of where I was crouched. I don't know what happened to him after that, but thankfully I never saw him again. I'm not sure if he was on drugs, mentally unstable, or both. I don't know if he had bad intentions. I do hope he got the help he needed, but to the man who followed me home, that wasn't cool. Let's not meet. So when I was 19 in my second year of university, I lived in a semi-small city, if you can even call it that really. Now, due to some other stuff that was going on at the time that I won't get into, I often went on walks by myself for my own well-being. I know a lone person should never walk alone at night, but again it was a small city. So while I was on this walk, a man approached me. At first, he was just trying his luck, so to speak, asking for my phone number. That's when he started becoming more and more aggressive, trying to force me to give him information. Where I lived, what times I walk alone. He told me how easily he could just follow me. At this point, I became really quite scared and basically told him to go away and leave me alone. That's when he tried to grab my phone and said, "You're coming with me." He grabbed both of my wrists and dragged me away. I've never felt such panic. He must have been a 6-foot-plus man of large stature. so I was no match for his strength. Being a 19-year-old girl who couldn't afford any kind of nutritious meal didn't help either. Anyway, by the grace of something, there was a pub nearby where people saw what was happening and came over to intervene. Thankfully, I got away. I took the long way home to prevent him from following me. I wish I could say that's where it ended. I didn't think he followed me at that point, but he clearly had. In the weeks that followed, we had a black car parked outside our address around midnight. The figure inside the car was very concealed. Anyway, this person stayed outside for hours. He would come out of the car occasionally and did what I would describe as lurking around our address. No, we didn't call the police at this time. Stupid, I know. When I wasn't home, and thankfully none of my housemates were either, our neighbors had to call the police because a man was trying to enter our home. He was looking for any openings in the windows and trying our back and front door handles. Alarmingly, this man was trying to enter my bedroom, which was on the ground floor. Anyway, one night we were all sitting in the kitchen drinking cheap booze, as uni students do, when the exact man who had approached me on the street those weeks ago jumped over our very tall back wall. He ran into our garden and just stared through the window. This man had a look in his eye I'd never seen before. Pure evil. He wasn't even alarmed that he'd been seen, nor was he spooked at all. So we called the police again, and he finally got caught and arrested after trying to run off from them. Also credit to the police here. They were there in literally 3 minutes. That may have helped since we lived so close to a police station. Anyway, what happened sends chills down my spine to this day. This man had a knife on him. What were his plans? What was he going to do? I'll never know, and I'm glad I never will. If there's a lesson here for anyone, it's don't walk the streets at night alone. And if you do, be with someone, even if you only live in a small area. These types of people are in every corner of our world. That being said, let's never meet again. All of these stories reminded me of something that happened to me back in 2008. This was a huge deal to my friends and family, and I didn't really talk about it back then because it scared the hell out of me. But it's been a while, and it's a really well-known creepy story among my friends and family. I figured I might as well share it, since it's admittedly terrifying. I was living with my parents and sister in Brisbane, Australia at the time, 2008, so I was 19. I remember my dad had just gotten Foxtel. That's cable TV in Australia, but only the TV in the lounge room could use the cable box. I really wanted to somehow get cable in my room without paying like $99 for a new box, so one day Dad went out and bought an AV transmitter and receiver. It was basically a 2-piece setup where you'd plug a tiny box into the cable TV in the lounge, and it would transmit a video signal to a receiver connected to the TV in my room. One Saturday, I decided to set it up. My younger sister, 16 at the time, was the only other person home upstairs in her room. Mine was downstairs. I opened the box and started connecting everything. At first, I was going back and forth trying to get the cables right and find the right channel, but no luck. Until finally I got something. I remember sitting there as the picture started fuzzing in. This is where it starts feeling like a horror movie. I thought, oh, here we go, and waited to see the picture clear up. But then I realized the cable set-top box wasn't even on. That's why it hadn't worked before, but then, why was I getting a signal? It hit me all at once as the picture fuzzed in and I saw a bed. I freaked the hell out because, at first, I thought it was my bed. I had recently seen Saw 2 and remembered that scene where she turns on the TV, and it's a camera filming her apartment. That was the first thing I thought of. I sprinted upstairs to my sister, absolutely terrified, and told her to come down and look. She came down and we both realized it wasn't my bed. We didn't know whose it was or how I was picking up the signal. Obviously, the AV receiver was picking up a camera feed, but we were so confused about who or what it was for. Eventually, my parents came home and we concluded it must be a neighbor or someone living nearby for us to be receiving the signal. We waited until about 6 p.m., and then someone came into the room. My dad recognized him as one of our neighbors. We still didn't know what the camera was for, but assumed it had something to do with fidelity. Either the neighbor or his wife had set it up to watch the other and see if they were cheating, or maybe it was to tape themselves having sex. We joked that maybe he was a murderer who filmed himself killing people in his room just to freak people out. We joked about one night turning on the feed and seeing him in clown makeup staring at the camera, then walking out with a knife. That never happened. But what did happen was still super creepy. We watched this signal for over a week, but after a few days, the novelty wore off. We felt weird watching it, and just settled on the cheating explanation. Then one day, when we turned it on, we realized what we discovered. Our neighbors were having renovations done to their house. During weekdays, they'd be out and workers were there all day. It had been like that for over a month. We watched the feed and saw a man walk into their room. It was the plumber who'd been there regularly. At first, we didn't think much of it, until he started opening drawers. I called out to my mom, the only person home at the time, and we watched as he started sniffing the wife's underpants and doing all sorts of creepy stuff. At first, we were like, oh my God, how embarrassing, he's being filmed. Will the neighbors see this somehow? But then what happened next was truly terrifying. He slowly walked over to the camera and looked right down the damn lens. We were convinced he knew we were watching. Mom immediately called Dad. I kept watching. He started fiddling with the camera, then put it back down. I told Mom I didn't think he actually knew we were watching, but he was definitely the guy who put the camera there. Dad came home and by then the plumber had left. Much to Mom's pleading, she was understandably terrified. Dad went over to the neighbors to tell them what we saw. The neighbors had no idea what we were talking about. They let Dad go into their room, and what he found holding the camera was an installed device in the wall meant to monitor water usage, which was normal at the time. Brisbane had been hit by a drought and there were water restrictions. The plumber had installed this device in the wall, but had hidden a camera behind it to watch the bed. The neighbors called the police, who came over and started an investigation. For the next week or so, we didn't hear much. I spent most of that time telling my friends and showing them pictures. But honestly, my whole family was scared every night. It was just so creepy thinking stuff like that could be hidden in your house. Maybe we didn't have anything else hidden, but it was terrifying to think about. A couple of weeks later, my mom spoke with the neighbor's wife and asked what happened. The wife said the police found out that the plumber would, at night, come to our street, sit in his car, which had really tinted windows, and watch them on his laptop. When Mom told me this, I got the biggest shivers. The scary part was that on multiple nights when I drove home late from my girlfriend's or walked home drunk after a night out, I remember seeing a station wagon. Not sure if that's what it's called outside Australia. It's like a big hatchback, parked about 30 meters down the street from our house. It was never there during the day, only at night. I'd always walk past and look at my reflection in the windows, assuming no one was inside. I was always confused about whose car it was, but never thought it was anything. It still scares me so much that it was just this creepy-ass plumber sitting there on his laptop, watching a hidden camera stream of my neighbors. Anyway, that's my story. It's all true and still creeps me out to this day, but my friends and I have a good laugh about it now.